And welcome to the second half hour of the Factor Uncensored. Rapper Travis Scott faced a lot of criticism over his 2021 Astroworld Festival. 10 people were killed at the massive crowd rush the stage, and hundreds were injured, despite calls for criminal charges that won't be happening. Today, a Harris County grand jury has declined to indict Travis Scott and others on any criminal charges. I called on legal analyst Chris Tritico to talk about this tonight.
So, Chris, does this mean that Travis Scott cannot be criminally charged in this case involving Astroworld? Obviously, 10 people have died and hundreds were injured.
In Harris County, there's a long-standing policy that they only go to the grand jury once. And so legally, there's no prohibition to going back to the grand jury, but the Harris County District Attorney's Office only goes once. And so that's the end of the criminal prosecution as far as it's concerned in Texas. It was an absolute tragedy. But as the father or the lawyer for one of the victims said, this was gross negligence, and he was right. And that's a civil standard. And those cases certainly have not ended.
And of course, we've had people to sue Travis Scott, Live Nation, Drake, many of the others involved in Astroworld, and some have already had settlements, right?
Yes, and the ones that haven't settled, those cases will go on, and the grand jury's action today has no effect on the civil case. And anyone who's still pending a civil litigation, those cases will go on and will be completed regardless of what the grand jury said, because it's a different standard, a lower standard. And so those cases will go on unaffected by the grand jury's action.
And of course, for those who are wondering, what did the grand jury look at to come to this decision? Obviously, you weren't there, you're not inside, but how did they weigh this, do you think? What's your opinion?
Well, it's hard to say exactly what they looked at, but the grand jury has the right to call witnesses before them and take testimony. Typically, in a case, the prosecutor comes in and presents evidence before the grand jury, can present witnesses if they choose. And I would imagine in a case like this, they did bring in witnesses to testify before the grand jury. And the defense, if they choose, can present evidence before the grand jury. Now, it's not like the state does. We can prepare packets and send it in and to the grand jury for them to review. And I don't know what Kent Schaefer did if he sent in a packet. I would imagine that so in a case like this he did. For the grand jury to weigh as they're looking at the evidence, for them to say, this is from our perspective what you need to be looking at. This is a civil case, not a criminal case, and here's why Travis Scott is not culpable in a criminal case. So they have all of that to look at in determining if there's probable cause to true bill or indict Travis Scott or any of the other defendants.
And when you say Kent Schaefer, just for the viewer out there, Kent Schaefer is the attorney that represents Travis Scott in this case.
That's correct.
And for those parents who are saying, of the victims who may say, look, we're not getting any justice here, what would you tell those parents? Obviously, their other alternative is a civil, and many of them have filed civil lawsuits. But for those who wanted criminal charges in this case, what can you tell them?
You know, look, and being someone who has lost a child, it's sad to go through this and to have this loss, but the justice system doesn't always find criminal culpability in cases like, and in a case like this, where you have this mass horde of people that were doing what they were doing, it does not mean that Travis Scott engaged in criminal conduct. And that's what the parents that are hurting and hurting as deeply and grieving as deeply as they are, that does not mean that Travis Scott engaged in criminal conduct. The people who were breaking down the fences and rushing that stage and crushing those people, that's where the criminality occurred. And it didn't necessarily mean that Travis Scott was the one who engaged in that criminal conduct. And that is what the grand jury had to weigh. And that makes it very difficult, I think, for a grand jury to find criminal conduct all the way up to Travis Scott, who was at the top of that board, in finding him criminally responsible for the acts of thousands and thousands of people who breached that fence and came over there and did all that stuff. This was a very difficult case for the state to make and find Travis Scott culpable. And that's what the grand jury had to weigh here. It was a very tough road for them to get there.